Today we are going to take a look at the Evolution R300DCT Plus cut-off saw, concrete cutting saw. I did have some quite serious problems with this saw, so is it any good and would I buy it again? Oh, blimey, this is a beast of a saw and I'm certainly not going to be carrying it for the entire review. But what I did want to do is give you a quick overview of all of this saw's good points and bad points. And I did have two quite serious problems that I'll tell you about later on. This is not a sponsored video, so I'm going to be brutally honest. Evolution don't even know I'm making this video, but I will tell you whether or not I would consider buying one again. So obviously we've completed our self-build extension project now, but a lot of you asked about various tools that we've used as part of that whole project, and I'm going to give you a bit of a rundown of tools that I would consider kind of essential purchases if you are going to be embarking on a project like this. And one of those tools I think is a cut-off saw, so a concrete cutting saw of some description. It's so useful for so many tasks around the build. I was considering hiring one, but in the end it would have been so many trips backwards and forwards to the hire shop that it really made sense to buy one. The market leader for these sort of saws is almost certainly Stihl, to the point that most people refer to these as Stihl saws, but Stihl is a brand and they're quite expensive. As far as I'm aware, the cheapest Stihl saw with water suppression is the TS410. I might be wrong about that, so please correct us in the comments, but the TS410 comes in at about £668. This cost me £399 and you can now buy it for £339.99, which is unbelievably cheap for a cut-off saw with water suppression. And by the way, you really want the water suppression if possible. The dust that this kicks out without it is biblical. One of the other things that really sold me on this one is the cutting depth. So this is a 300mm blade, but it has a cutting depth of 115mm, which is absolutely fantastic because most 300mm cut-off saws only have a cutting depth of 100mm, which isn't quite enough to get through old imperial bricks. So on a project like this, where we're cutting lots of holes in walls and things, with a typical 300mm Stihl saw, you're always left with that little kind of edge of a brick that hasn't quite got cut all the way through, because you're limited by the distance from the edge of the blade to kind of the arbor or the washer around the arbor. It's available in 230 volts or 110 volts, although every time I've checked the 110 volt version hasn't been in stock for whatever reason. It does say on the website that it's designed for professional use, so I would expect it to work for me as kind of an amateur self-builder. 300mm premium diamond blade. Again, quite a big selling point of the Evolution's blades are always really good. I've never had a problem with Evolution's blades and they generally cut through anything. 2400 watt motor, 3-year warranty. It's also got an RCD built in. Pretty much every time I've used the saw I've had to press the reset button before it'll work, but that's kind of a nice comforting factor to know you've got the RCD there, because obviously you're playing with water and electricity, so you do need to be a little bit careful. The weight of it, 9.7 kilos, so you know, it's not light. You're not going to be swinging it around your head while you're swinging off the scaffolding, but at the same time, it's about on par with the Stihl saw equivalent kind of size. I believe the Stihl TS410 is 9.4 kilos, so a little bit heavier, but then I think the Stihl saw weight is without the blade and obviously without the fuel tank being full and all that sort of thing. Which brings me on to the main advantage of this saw, is that obviously it's electric, and for me that has a number of advantages. First of all, you're not messing on with fuel and fuel mixtures and all that sort of thing. It's much quieter. I mean, don't get us wrong, it's still pretty loud, but it's way quieter than petrol cut-off saws. So for me, I just prefer that. It's not as intrusive for your neighbours, and if you're using it all day, it is kind of nice that it's just quite quiet. I mean, I'll switch it on now and see if I can vaguely show you how loud it is. So you're not going to be sleeping through it being on, but it is significantly quieter than the petrol equivalents. I'm assuming it's got some sort of motor braking built in as well. Don't know, it slows down pretty quickly, although there's nothing in the specs specifically about braking, so I don't think it has a brake built in as such. I think it's just relying on the friction of the motor. And I know a lot of you will be saying, oh, is the power cord not annoying? And it's like, well, if you're going to have a hose connected to it for the water suppression anyway, well, that's quite annoying. If you were never planning on using water suppression, then what I would probably do is go for one of the new cordless kind of battery operated ones. But if you're going to have a hose going to it anyway, then I'd rather have the power of it being mains operated. I guess that's a personal preference thing. Let us know in the comments down below. Steel handle with a rubberized grip over it, so it's really comfortable to hold and use at various different angles. Rubberized grip at the rear as well, and this is also obviously where you've got the safety switch for switching it on and off, but I'm going to come back to that in a minute. One thing to look out for is that I found some hose connectors didn't fit on this. Evolution supplied a hose connector with it, and that obviously fits absolutely fine, but I did have problems with some cheap hose connectors not clipping on properly, so I'm not entirely sure if that's a me problem or it's not the end of the world. This one actually works fine, or it seems to. You see, it is clicking on, but I have had some where it must just be something to do with the inner diameter of the connector. But as I say, the connector that Evolution supplied with the hose works fine, and it's a bit of a better quality connector anyway. So I just leave a permanent length of hose attached, and I just use a back-to-back connector there to connect it onto whatever water supply I'm using. We've got a spindle lock here for when you need to change the blade. And we've also got the ability to alter the angle of the guard as well, which is kind of nice. So this saw has had a really good workout. I've been using it for pretty much 2 years now. I bought it back in June 2021, and as far as I'm aware, it was pretty new to the market at that time, but it has been used for all sorts of things on our self-build extension project, and we've used it subsequently for loads of other projects as well. So it's a really useful tool to have. I'm pleased that we bought one, but it's not without fault, and 2 of the faults are quite serious. The first one is that when I first bought this, the saw was literally brand new, and within a couple of days I found that the safety switch was getting jammed in the on position. So basically, if you imagine you have to press that, and then you're holding it like that with the saw going at full pelt, well, if that stays stuck in, the trigger doesn't always release. And that's what was happening. Basically, I would press the button to activate the saw, and then because that button was kind of half pushed in, I don't know, it must have been stuck in on the inside or something. I don't know what was causing it, but basically I was taking my finger off the trigger and the saw was still going. It happened several times, and if you've ever used a saw like this, you know it's nearly 10 kilos and you've got a blade spinning at 4,600 RPM, you get a kind of gyroscopic effect from that, and it becomes quite difficult to control the saw, especially when you're not expecting it. So that was a little bit scary. What I ended up doing was just squirting a bit of WD-40 into the switch, and it's never had the problem since. But I did raise it with Evolution, and I said, you know, has anyone else reported this? And they said they would look into it and get back to us, and I haven't heard anything further. So if you do have one of these saws, have you run into that problem with it being stuck in the on position? What I ended up actually having to do on occasion was to use RCD to switch the saw off. It was the only way I could actually switch it off, was literally to just trip it from the RCD. And then you couldn't make this one up, but the saw had been sitting in the shed over winter time. I hadn't touched the saw at all. It was carefully packed away. I always look after my tools really well, and I came to use it this spring, and well, I ended up with a kind of bespoke water feature in our garden. Every part of the water supply hose had perished and water was just peeing out of the thing. Luckily it was still under warranty, so I got in touch with Evolution. Evolution were really good, very helpful, great customer service, couldn't fault it on that side. So I had the option of boxing this whole thing up and sending it back to Evolution, or they offered to send me the parts and I could have a go at fixing it myself. So I've offered to do the repair myself, mainly because I can't be arsed with the hassle of trying to post this thing anywhere, because it's pretty heavy. And Evolution have sent me a water tube, a 10mm water tube, and a bunch of little blade guard water tubes, plus some little fixing bits as well, which I'm not 100% we need them, but we'll come back to that. And in all honesty, it's not been too bad to get the hose off, the old hose. Here's the old hose. I'll show you the state of that in a minute. It's just, I have concerns. So to get that off, there was a little cover plate just under here, which was this little fella here. All of the screws, they're all Torx, and they'd all completely rusted up in 2 years. So I've got them kind of bathing in WD-40 at the minute to try and get a little bit of the rust off before putting it all back together. But once you've got that off, there's just this kind of head assembly here to get off, which is just, again, Torx screws. That comes off, and then you can kind of thread the pipe out of this. You don't need to take this off. So you thread it out of that, out of this section here, and then there's a nice, the one stainless steel bit that I found, a nice little stainless steel retainer there for where it joins onto the hose connector at that end. But the thing that really worries me about this saw, as I say, it's only 2 years old, and it's how much of it is rusting up already. You can see all of these bolts here are all absolutely covered in rust. All of these bolts are covered in rust. These bolts here are completely rusty. This plate thing has all started rusting up. The more worrying thing around here is the actual plate and bolt that holds the blade assembly on has started to corrode as well. These bolts here are rusty. This is rusty, this bar down the bottom here. And here's a little bit where the 10mm hose splits off into two of the little, I think they're 6mm hoses for the actual blade water suppression. And can you see how this one is completely kinked? When I put the new one in, I'll try and put it in without the kink, but I think it's just the way it's designed. I think it is gonna kink. We shall see. But anyway, yeah, the hose, so it's just a plastic hose with a metal kind of coil thing inside it. This is the bit that's had most of the leaks, but look at the state of this. Oh my word. I don't know if you can see that, but it's cracked all the way down there. Basically, it's just split everywhere. The whole thing is just, no wonder. I'm surprised there wasn't more water coming out, to be honest. So yeah, I'm going to try and get the metal thing out of the inside of this. So I'm just going to kind of poke this down and hope that I can poke enough of it out the other end to pull it out. There it is. At least this does actually seem to be stainless steel. The question is this new replacement hose just going to fall to bits? Time will tell. God, no wonder they had a kink in this hose. The design of this is just terrible. Like, no wonder it was kinked before. I think before it just wasn't lined up. But it's not easy. No, that's putting a kink in that hose straight away. And it's almost completely unavoidable. It's just the hose is so tight over the top of this. The whole thing, it screams of bodge. Right, that's that side on. But no, this side's got a massive kink in it. It's little self-tappers on this side that go into the plastic. Which of course is really hard to get to when that tube's in the road. Why would you put the screw in the place where the tube is? Well, these are just directly threaded into this aluminium, and that feels like the thread's gone to me. I'm not going to tighten it anymore, but it's not getting to a tight point. So obviously these are machine screws here. Yeah, this aluminium's only, let's have a look. I'd like to say 3mm thick, but I think it's only 2mm thick. So how well's that going to hold a thread? The answer is not very well, and yeah, that thread, as far as I'm concerned, that thread's gone, but okay. And I've actually just noticed this. What's with the weird, obviously this is aluminium, and they must have been welded together. What's with the weird quality of the weld across the top there? That can't be right. Right, moment of truth. It's got to be the only stop tap where it's off in that direction. It's on that way. Okay, I might actually change that because that's really obtuse way of doing things. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Are we getting water out of both sides? Ugh. Let's say, I think we are. Yeah, we are. I can see bubbles in the pipe there. So, it's fixed. So obviously I'm not particularly impressed with those problems that I've run into. I'm a little bit concerned about all of the rusty bolts and things, and I have no idea how long this hose repair is going to last. Unless they've changed the formulation of the rubber or plastic or whatever it is, I suspect it's going to do exactly the same thing in a couple of years' time. Now that I know how to fix it, I probably could fit a better quality hose if I can get hold of one. The other thing that I'm doing is that over the winter time when it's stored away, I'm spraying everything that's going rusty with WD-40 in the hope that it's just going to kind of hold the rust back a little bit. But the big question is, would I buy this again? And the answer is probably yes, because for a kind of semi-professional use, or even professional use where you're not necessarily going to be using it all the time, then I'm happy to put up with the problems that I've run into now that I know how to fix them myself. What I might do is at some point later down the line is switch out some of the bolts that have gone rusty for stainless steel bolts. I don't know how practical that's going to be. They might be quite bespoke. But at the end of the day, if I went for the still equivalent of this, or the petrol version, which I still didn't particularly want a petrol saw, but I'm looking at nearly 700 quid. Husqvarna do the K770. Again, you're looking similar, 650, 700 quid for their version. I think if you are happy to go petrol rather than electric, Hyundai do one around the 470 mark. But with all of those, you're still going to be limited on the depth of cut you're going to get to 100, 105 mil, I think, for the Hyundai one. but as I say, it's really nice having the 115mm cut on this. And if you want to go up the range to something with a bigger cut depth, you're probably going to have to go for a 14-inch saw instead of a 12-inch. I think that would be a 350mm saw, and then you could go for something really posh like the Milwaukee, and they do like a really nice battery one, but it's coming on for £2 grand. So for me, this 339 quid, it's unbelievably cheap for what you get. But you just need to go into it with your eyes wide open that you're going to be buying a 350 quid saw versus a 700 or maybe £1,000 saw. So all I'm saying is there's pros and cons. Don't expect it to last forever. Obviously corners have been cut here to get it to a certain price point. So folks, let me know what you think. If you've bought one of these, let us know in the comments down below. It's always interesting to get other people's opinions of these sort of things. I think Steve and Alex from Steve and Alex Bricklaying have got one of these. I'm not sure, but go and check out their channel anyway, because it's brilliant. As I say, this channel isn't sponsored, and it's not sponsored by the fact that we've got lovely, lovely people supporting the show over on the Members Zone. members.gosforthhandyman.com if you want to join the fun over there. Loads of extra videos and all sorts of extra things. I've added a new download section where you can download all the plans and budgets and everything to do with our self-build, so if you are going into a project like that, it might be useful. If you're new to the channel, do hit subscribe, because we've got loads more videos coming up all about a lot of the different tools that we've ended up buying on this project. Folks, as per usual, look after each other, be nice to one another, and we shall see you next time. Tatty bye.